Mr. J. Venkatramu, CEO, India Post Payment Bank, Mr. Rahul Gupta, CEO, Avanti Finance, Ms. Radhika Tamwada, Product Head Financial Services, PhonePe, Mr. R. Mohan, Chief Innovation Officer, FIA, and the panel will be moderated today by Mr. Manoj Kumar Sharma, Director, Microsafe Consulting. We are grateful to the speakers for agreeing to our request to join this discussion, and I'm positive that we'll be able to take some key and concrete points forward, looking recommendation for action. Welcome once again, and I now hand over the session to Mr. Manoj Kumar Sharma to initiate the conversation.
Thanks so much, Kirti, and delighted to be here this morning along with a very esteemed group of panelists. So the issue before us is, of course, responsible digital finance. But in some senses, the responsible bit comes alongside the whole usage that should happen, the access that should happen. And I think in India, we have done phenomenally well in terms of creating access. I mean, today, 4 out of 5 Indians have a bank account. So technically, they are onboarded, they are included, financially included, and so on. Our challenge comes when it gets to the whole usage issue, this whole broad issue around usage. And recently, during the lockdown, we did a study around how are poor people faring in terms of getting access to financial services, because to be fair to the industry, I mean, this was one of the industries that did not stop. It worked right through the pandemic. All the agents took all the risks while we were locked up at home and not seeing anyone. They've worked in the field, handled lots of crowds, so that the social benefits that were provided by the governments could be withdrawn by them. But it's very interesting that a typical bank branch, this study we covered more than 10,000 beneficiaries from the low income segment. And we asked them, so what's the typical distance of a bank branch? So in urban areas, it was 2.8 kilometers. In rural areas, it was 3 kilometers. An ATM was around about 2 kilometers to 2.2 kilometers in rural and urban areas. An agent was more like 1.8, 1.9 kilometers away. And very interestingly for Mr. Venkatramu, the India Post outlet, the post office, was just about 1.2 kilometers away for people. But given this distance, given the fact that branches are typically crowded, one would expect that a lot of people would A, go to the post office, and B, probably go to this agent network. But surprisingly, only about 13% of the people went to the agent. And about 2% were at the post office. ATMs took about 15 to 20% of the overall footfall. And branches continue to take about 65, 67% of the total people went to the branch to withdraw. Now, we have created this phenomenally good infrastructure, but somehow the usage tends to get inverted. When it comes to usage of these infrastructural points, it tends to get inverted despite the fact that access is really better. I mean, if you look at it, any bank branch, especially in a rural setting, it is so crowded, people tend to go there and wait for very long, whereas the agent provides very, very good access points. So in some senses for us, I think responsible finance starts with, how do I streamline this whole access issue? How do I get people to start using some of these channels that have got created, to start using the technology platforms that have got created? And I think that's where the whole, the excluded segments, so to say, are suffering at the usage level. How do we get them to use these products, these channels, these delivery platforms that we have created? And so the whole sort of last mile connectivity delivery continues to, it's good. From the 13% sort of, agent usage, it's again brought back to that normal of around 10%. So as soon as normalcy returns, 20% traffic moves to ATMs, about 65, 70% remains in the branches, and the level, we get 10%. What that also means is that the agent isn't making enough money. This intermediary that we have created for the people doesn't make enough money. I mean, how do we get the footfall to rise unless the usage increases? So I would just like, as a very free-flowing discussion for this, this panel of ours, to sort of reflect on this and say that how do we get people to draw and get them to draw into digital channels in the first place? What is it that we are missing, or what do we need to do to draw this user segment for whom we are creating this entire piece to start using some of these services? And I'll start with Radhika, and then we can follow any particular order that you would like to. Some initial thoughts I think would be very, very, very good. So Radhika, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Manoj. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so as you rightly pointed out, right, we've come a long way with respect to accessibility to a bank account. There are multiple government schemes which are like, helping the users get a bank account, but that is just like one of the initial steps, a long way to go after that. I'll just speak about some of how we are thinking about this reach of financial products or services from PhonePe perspective, right? So thanks to the technology, now if you have an app or a website, you can actually, in a cost-effective way, reach out to every nook and corner of the country, right? So that is from the technology part of it, how the digital thing makes it easy. But usage, how do we get the users to use the product? Right? We are thinking of it in a phased approach, right? In a PhonePe, in our first initial phase, we were thinking, how do we ensure we solve the core use cases of the users? Like, what are the core use cases? How can we make it easy for users to send money, right, from one person to another? How do we make it easy to recharge your phone, right? These are basic necessities in users' lives. At the end of the day, user has to connect with that need, right? And if I want to pay my electricity bill, water bill, how do I do that? How do I make it convenient using a digital app, right? Riding on the convenience factor. But these core use cases, yes, we've got adoption. People who are digitally ready will onboard the app because of the convenience it provides, right? So that is phase one. But to really get into the roots of India, right, to the second phase, we are planning to use the merchant network. This is where the merchant network becomes really important. The merchant acceptance in every part of the country does two things, right? First is, for a normal user, it creates some awareness. Like if I am in a remote village and if I go to my local Kirana store, and if I see that person is accepting a QR code, like PhonePe or whatever digital payment thing is, first of all, it creates awareness to the users in that segment. It helps in that. Second is it creates a trust factor, right? It's now a network, right? Now people, as merchants use it, people have a sense of confidence and trust on this new payment mechanism. So it helps in that way. So in phase two of our journey, we've been focusing a lot on how to increase this merchant acceptance, right? A lot of work, a lot of effort has happened in the last year, and this year going massively after small merchants and also into all the talukas of the country, right? And see how needs a lot of feet on street to go and create this awareness and onboarding. But we think for growing digital payments, this is an important step, right? So we are trying to penetrate that way and reach the masses in that way. And that is phase two. And the third thing is, once slowly the users come onto the product, right, with their basic use cases of whatever use cases, whether it's paying to your local Kirana store or recharge that we talked about, then gradually, once they are on the product, the beauty of digital products is we have the user. There's no we can reach out to that user now. Then slowly onboard them into other financial products and services based on their need. So that is the phased approach we at PhonePe are taking. In fact, I think demonetization, as well as currently the pandemic, right, the current situation, did act as a catalyst to, in my opinion, right? What it did was maybe that awareness and the need would have taken time. But these two things now, even in the COVID time, because of safety reasons, people are looking for an alternative. So now digital payments has become more of a necessity. People are looking like a basic necessity. And we are seeing the highest ever organic user acquisition over the last couple of months, right, on PhonePe, because of the need. Like, we don't really have to do a lot of marketing. People are coming in because they are seeing it as a need. Still baby steps, long way to go, but that is the approach we are taking at PhonePe.
Thanks so much, Radhika. These are very good opening remarks. So, can I draw in on the next panelist? Maybe we go to Mr. Venkatramu and then have Rahul and Mohan weigh in.
Thanks, Manoj. Quite interesting. I should thank Ms. Radhika for actually opening up and also the template in which the expansion is happening. I think more or less the thinking at our end is also same, but more importantly, we come from two different extremes. Probably if you look at PhonePe as a model, PhonePe has a lot of users who have got smartphone, but whereas in our case, we have a lot of users who don't even have basic smartphone. So these are the two extremes of the financial ecosystem that we are talking about. From that aspect, what we have seen and what I completely agree with Ms. Radhika is about inculcating the basic habit of finances through payments. So payments that way becomes the stepping stone for financial inclusion. And from that perspective, what we've seen is more adoption happening from G2P payments. When I say G2P, it is government to person payments. Lot of subsidies which get flown through the bank accounts is what is coming as the starting point for us in terms of having some kind of a financial relationship. And that's where India Post Payment Bank has played its role. And even during the pandemic time, we were able to reach out to a large number of villagers and to the customers in terms of delivering these benefits. But having said that, that's not the end of it. I think every one of us agreed that today accessibility is not a point. Accessibility is definitely there. But more importantly, what next in terms of offering to these customers? I think that from that standpoint, credit becomes one of the most important product from the social upliftment angle and even from the lifestyle angle for this set of customers. That is one offering can really fill up the requirement part, and that's where is in large demand. So as a next step, suppose if you talk about the phase 2 part, I think credit is definitely there. But on the other side, how can we penetrate the merchant ecosystem? How can we create this merchant ecosystem? And also, how can we make the non-smartphone users or a feature phone user to get into these kind of digital payments is one question which probably needs to be addressed through some technology advancement. I mean, earlier there were certain other technology form factors were tried, but they were not largely successful because of various reasons. So in terms of market penetration for merchant payments, yes, that will also enhance the user adoption, and maybe that will create some kind of a trail as far as transactions is concerned, and that can also help in offering of credit. Like today we have seen how nano credit is penetrating into the market. Loans as low as 5,000 rupees are being given, and that's been adopted quite aggressively by the users, especially the millennial segment. So a similar kind of experimentation probably if done across these customers who are receiving DBT benefits in terms of small value loans, which could be short term in nature, I think that will define the financial inclusion as a part of the next phase.
Thanks. This is very interesting and gives us the sort of perfect segue. If credit is going to be the use case that is going to draw people into the sort of network, the retail network that digital finance is creating, has created, then I think we'd like to hear from Rahul that how strong a use case does he A, see, and B, what's the model that Avanti is sort of building, because it's one of the the digital only platforms that is starting with a product other than payments, let us say. So Rahul, over to you.
Thank you. Let's just step back and look at some of the real problems that we are trying to solve. So while certainly there's been enormous progress that India has made in terms of its digital infrastructure and architecture, be it democratizing payments, be it the identity layers, so on and so forth, there are still about 500 to 600 million people, or about 100 to 120 million households who don't have access to formal credit. And if you look at the smartphone penetration in the country, there are only about 300 to 350 million unique users. Now, a lot of the innovation that has happened, and the unicorns that have been formed in the country, if you really look at it, their products and services are pretty much catered to the same crowd of 100 million people. So whether you look at e-commerce, you look at digital payments, you look at even UPI, which is doing over 2 billion transactions with the stated goal of 1 billion transactions a day, which is going to really sort of turn the game on its head. Currently, unless, there is a whole sort of universe of people who are out of the smartphone economy. And how do you solve for them? And if digital financial services, if we consider it as a fundamental beachhead to resolving livelihoods, then we also have to sort of reimagine both the access, the product construct, and the delivery mechanisms and the cost disruption there. So as we looked at, so Avanti's goal really is to provide for affordable financial services to those who are currently out of the formal credit system, provide it in an affordable, accessible way. And we are clearly targeted at the underserved and the unserved. So as we embarked upon our journey, the first thing was really seeing if we are going to be laser focused on this segment, let's kind of understand what are the challenges they have. And as you mentioned today, they may not have formal credit history. They may not even have a smartphone. And now the second point is also related directly to access, because they don't have a smartphone. They can't self-serve. So it's not like an app-based fulfillment that happens. So we said if we are going to access these customers and also develop products that cater to the requirements, the nature of approach must be very hyper-local. So we came out with an assisted approach model. So our entire process is essentially digital, which is the onboarding part of it, which is the credit operations part of it. So that is purely digital. But there is an intervention through community partners, which helps in onboarding the customers. So we have a completely presence-less model. We don't have any branches. So the Avanti app now is utilized by the agents of our partners, who then fill up all the details along with the end user. So it's not a self-serve, it's an assisted model. So how does this help? One is it helps us reach deep into areas where people have not reached so far. Two is it gives us very local inputs on the kind of products that are required, because most of these are cash flow based products. A lot of people have no financial footprints. Standardization of products doesn't work. You have to understand their livelihoods and cash flows and develop products accordingly. So you need systems, processes, and a nature that is both sort of, uses crowdsourcing, hyperlocal elements, and a very flexible system that we have created, a platform that we have created. And the sort of jugalbandi of that is what will ultimately serve the users. So that's kind of what we are trying to solve. So we're saying there are enough people who are solving for the 100 million or so top people. But if you really go into the next 500 or 600 billion who are excluded, 600 million, sorry, pardon me, who are excluded, how do you build an approach which is where you link technology with community livelihood systems to empower the users at the base of the pyramid?
Thanks, Rahul. That's very interesting, and that actually is the perfect segue to move over to Mohan for his opening remark. So, I mean, we can segment this country into sort of three broad segments. One is the smartphone user, who is now absolutely spoiled for choice in terms of financial products, in terms of payment, channels and so on. And to top it all, of course, there are no charges for payment. We are creating an absolutely out of the world system in India. Then there is the basic phone user. And that's a fairly significant segment. And we really haven't managed to sort of give them an outreach channel, an interface channel that is user-friendly. So we have tried with USSD, and of course, more or less, I think, given up, even though, I mean, it does exist. And then, of course, there is this very large segment, 600 million, as Rahul pointed out, no phone users. So right now, the feature phone users and the no phone users get to outlets such as, a FIA outlet. But why is it that it's still not being used to the extent that it should be, Mohan? I mean, that's something you can try and reflect on.
Thanks, Manoj. First, I thank Access team for giving this opportunity, and great pleasure to be part of this forum. In fact, it's quite interesting what PhonePe is doing, India Post Payment Bank is doing, and what Avanti Capital is doing. So FIA is the consolidator of all these services, and really I'm delighted to share our experience, how we at FIA are building financial products and services for underserved and unserved population. Our continuous effort with the aim of building an extensive digital expressway that is elevating the last miles access to financial services. And another thing, I'm really interested to highlight some of the things about FIA's success or impact on building financial products and services is best narrated through numbers. FIA is the only bootstrap fintech startup in India which has been profitable since inception, growing at a CAGR of 92%. With our 27,000 plus FIA centers, we bank nearly 2.7% of India and Nepal, including 9 million women. Our digital distribution network serves 36 million plus individuals in remote areas of South Asia. We digitize $4 billion in cash annually, cover more than 90% of India and Nepal geographically, and provide livelihood opportunities to more than 3,800 plus women entrepreneurs. Currently, we have been working as corporate BC for 26 public sector, rural and private sector banks, and serving low and middle income customers through our 27,000 plus agents across all districts by providing our AI-based technology platform, Finvesta, which is the one-stop superstore for all Sachet financial services for unserved and underserved markets. The Sachet financial services starts from banking, remittance, loans, insurance, investments, pension, utility and bill payments, digital EMI collection, recoveries, and wealth management. Our tech platform in both web and perform in both web and mobile. It's obvious business correspondent or an important channel for financial inclusion. Whatever we have done through PMJDY would not have been possible without BC's CSP channel. We are putting in all efforts to make this channel stronger and give them all forms of supports that they require. Another thing, how products can be offered at scale from FIA point of view. Obviously, creating or adding a new financial products entails a greater degree of risk. Nevertheless, in FIA, before implementing any product, we used to analyze the suitability and acceptability of the product, for which we used to take different type of ground level feedback through focus group discussion during CGT, MFI, SIG meeting, etc. After that, we have internal approval committee which would analyze the entire things. Based on that, we'll create a process along with technology development with the support of AI. So a deeper understanding of consumer aspiration and preference is essential for the success of other products that do not have the benefit of a natural pull. I'd like to share one of our initiative as an example how FIA is initiating to implement a product in the ground level. Let us take a complicated product, mutual fund. So we implemented mutual fund in the rural, and we did not try to sell the product just like that and not allowing to do mis-selling. First, we have understood the habit of the segment and what are they expecting from us, because they are already facing crisis by losing their hard-earned money through unorganized cheats, spent lavishly by their family members, and overcommitment of saving and other expenses. So in order to satisfy them, to create a confidence to save money with their capability, we have created a wealth management system having goal-based solutions and recommendation by combing the power of liquidity and equity mutual funds, which has been, the schemes has been modified as per the requirement with a minimum investment of 500 rupees, which is affordable for LMI groups.
Sure.
Continuous,
Yeah.
Continuous investments also can be leveraged to get the loan on the full years if the need is emergency. All these services would be extended free of cost to LMIs. This kind of initiative would certainly create a confidence and interest to start saving in a secured manner. Accordingly, we have built our AI-based tech platform, Finostar, to accommodate and fulfill the requirements of the field level. Another major feature is we are accommodating non-PAN cases also on real-time basis, since PAN is mandatory for mutual funds.
Sure, Mohan. We'll get to products. I mean, there is a whole section that's devoted to products, and I'm sure that FIA would have a broad range of products to talk about. In fact, one of the whole draw-in strategy, as we just talked about as well, and Rahul sort of weighed in on it, and Mr. Venkatramu also weighed in, was that is credit a strong draw use case that will get poor people to start using digital finance. And I think there is broad agreement on that. Credit is a very, very strong use case. In fact, if you look at the whole microfinance industry, I mean, in India, microfinance industry is really big now, despite bushfires here and there. It's a $35 billion industry, and it's been largely created over the last 15 years or so. That's when the actual growth happened, and to have got to this level. And one of the features of the sort of this whole microfinance industry has been a couple of pillars. One pillar is women. It's entirely targeted at women, and it's a very interesting point, because today, if you look at the whole PMJDY accounts, around 42% of women's accounts are supposed to be dormant, and here is a product that's entirely focused on women and has seen phenomenal growth. I mean, we get to growth numbers despite so many years and despite the industry reaching this scale. I mean, this year, of course, will be an aberration of 70 to 80% overall growth in terms of outstanding that the microfinance industry has. And the other pillar, of course, is doorstep delivery. I think this has been a sort of a killer combination for the microfinance industry. If we were to take a step back and say that, okay, so what are the absolutely key selling points of this industry? And India Post Payment Bank, of course, this time started with doorstep delivery. They contracted FSS to provide the doorstep banking services sort of software. It was reported in the press as well during the pandemic, because it was something that was sort of different, let us say, that people were, the postman was going across and delivering cash at the doorstep. Of course, the model of India Post allows them to do this, because that's the postman's job. They go to the house of whoever has a money order or has a letter and deliver it. So, Mr. Venkatramu, what has been the experience of IPPB in terms of this doorstep delivery? And is this something that can become the model for IPPB to differentiate it, or it's something that will remain at the periphery, and you will sort of keep this along with sort of clients reaching out to your outlets? So just would like to hear from you on how this whole experiment went. I think Mr. Venkatramu isn't there. So let's while keeping this whole sort of focus around products, and Radhika, you did mention that there are products that you are building and that you will sort of PhonePe has become a really, really big player. So now, I mean, as you move in with more products, I'm sure that you can influence some of the industry-wide trends, I would say. So,
Manoj, Venkatramu is back as well.
Yes. So should I? Okay, Mr. Venkatramu, just wanted to hear from you on what the whole the delivery, the doorstep delivery. Even if 2% of the people went, that's a very significant number for a country like India with so many low-income people. So is that going to become a mainline distribution strategy for IPPB? Are you going to now focus on doorstep delivery? That's one. The other is that what was the experience? Somewhere linked to this, if it's going to be a scaled decision that will happen, I think the first thing is, what was the experience of IPPB? And did it draw more people into your network, or was it sort of just another value-added service?
Yeah, sure. I can share with you some of the inputs or experiences that we've come across during last 1 year. Definitely the doorstep services are here to stay. Given the fact that the Dakia is so used to that kind of activity that earlier he used to go and deliver letters and money orders. And today that has taken a different shape and form factor, where he's going with a device and delivering cash at the doorstep. And we've seen a large-scale adoption of these particular services across the rural hinterlands. And at the same time, what I would also like to share is that we also have these rural post offices, rural village level post offices, where people can walk in and avail the services. But surprisingly, we have not seen many people availing these services from these outlets. So which means people are quite used to get these services right at the doorstep, and maybe for whatever reasons they would like to have this definitely at the doorstep. So extending this template to other set of services is definitely one of the factors that we are going to rely on in terms of adding more and more services. So what we've also seen is that this set of customers not only receive money from the Dakias, but they are also tend to do other services. Like we've seen bill payments and money transfers happening from these villages. And also even small time traders, they're able to send money, use this facility for money transfer, for getting the goods and the other payments that they are able to do. So the delivery of services through doorstep is definitely going to be a very, very strong thread and strong factor for financial services. And credit can definitely be part of that services.
Thanks, Mr. Venkatramu. It's very interesting that the doorstep delivery model of India Post would be sort of furthered by India Post Payment Bank, and it could, if economies of scale could be achieved through that doorstep delivery model, we could see a very unique sort of model, not only for the country, but I would say globally. I mean, we don't have very many. The moment you move out of microfinance, the doorstep delivery concept sort of fades away. There is no concept. Financial services as an industry has always been is a regulated industry, and hence it's always been about getting the client into a setup that is regulated and then providing the service. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how this pans out. And I'll actually come to Rahul with this as well. But for now, Radhika, there is this whole issue about, as I said, 42% of the women accounts are dormant. Their usage issues are not there. At the same time, if we talk to banks, especially public sector banks, there is a clear sort of, we don't want more products, because more products means fraud happening at the agent point. So even simple products such as a recurring deposit, which is, you save up to reach a certain level, banks are very reluctant, saying that the more savings products we start offering, the more challenges of fraud happening at agent points, and we don't have the wherewithal and the mechanism to supervise all of this. So on the one hand, we have genuine challenges about usage, about drawing people into agent outlets and these platforms that we have created. And as Rahul also mentioned, people, they will not use these services because they don't have smartphones. So in that sense, what's your trajectory? And you did mention about products and so on, but keeping these two issues about the whole digital divide, the digital readiness of some of these clients to be interface with the platforms we are building, what's the strategy that PhonePe has as it is going about, adding to the product basket?
Yeah, sure. So as I think people are moving to digital platforms, there are both pros and cons, right? Like, your distribution becomes really cost effective. There are no middlemen that you need to manage on the ground. So that is the pro, and you can build the best experience for the user. On the other end, on the digital side, and these are like first time internet users, right? They are like, they know the internet for the first time with a small phone. So educating them, then there are also so many fraud cases and risk cases. How do we proactively ensure that we catch these issues on the digital platforms in the beginning itself, so that the trust is not lost? I think this is the balance we need to do, ensuring the experience is kept at a premium and also ensuring at the same time fraud and risk is mitigated. So at PhonePe, I think for us, we get a lot of first-time internet users, right? In fact, majority, over 80% of our transactions these days are coming from tier 2, tier 3 and beyond, right? So we have a lot of these users coming and using the platform, and they may or may not be digitally ready, right? The heart of the product experience at PhonePe is simplicity, right? We really put that new user, we put ourselves in their shoes and figure out if the user is really coming in, how can we make sure the product itself is educative, right? They don't need additional lot of hand holding, lot of jargon. The moment once we sell investment products on our platform, right? The moment you see a lot of jargons, lot of products out there, it's too overwhelming for a new user. Right? On the platform, in that little screen, how do you ensure the journey is such that it's very simple and seamless to the user, right? Like some examples, right? Like a new user, if he wants to do a payment, if he just logs in with his mobile number, we automatically link the bank account, right, via the UPI thing. And user doesn't really have to add a beneficiary. Any additional step will cause a friction point for these new users and they'll not use the product, right? So even in the digital payment use case, we've made it really simple with phone number, linking the bank account, you said with UPI pin, like, no adding beneficiaries, no wait times and all of that, right? And similarly, in investment products, KYC is a huge challenge. The moment the user sees a form filling exercise, yeah, we've moved it from paper to digital. But even on the digital world, if he has like these many forms and things to fill, the user is lost, right? We are doing like initiatives. There are smaller initiatives like, we are using technology. We are using optical character recognition. Once the user takes a picture of his Aadhaar card, we just pre-populate, right? He doesn't have to enter his address or date of birth and all of that. We just pre-populate and send the KYC details. So experience-wise, we are making sure how each page, each field, each word on the product is very intuitive to the user, right? That is, we think experience is the key to get these users. Simplicity, making sure the product is simple. On the other end, there is also the ecosystem related changes, right? For example, why should the user, going with the KYC example, right? Why should the user do KYC again for investment products? He has already done KYC via the bank, right? We are working with Niti Aayog and players to figure out like, how can we make KYC process frictionless? How can we not have the user redo KYC again and again? Right? This is like an ecosystem play. We need to, all the players involved should work towards a better thing so that the entire process gets simplified. That will be really a step jump, right? So a mix of experience plus ecosystem changes would really create that adoption thing. And at the same time, I would say like we have a full team working on the fraud and risk. There are two things, right? One is reactive. Once it happens, how do you address and do it? But more importantly, PhonePe is mostly on the proactive fraud detection. How do we see the patterns of a user and try to put them as a fraudster before he actually indulges in that activity? So this is the kind of technology we need to use to put these kind of risks at bay.
Thanks so much, Radhika. And I think it's very interesting you brought about the whole user interface point, because it's so very crucial. I mean, even with the assisted model, the user's capacity to interface, to understand what is going on, is so very important. And especially once we are trying to get the user to actually use the platform on its own, it becomes absolutely critical. We did some studies around, what's the user understanding of typical icons that are there in the apps that we have. So, and how does a user who is probably not educated or is not very conversant with numbers, how do they really count? And it's a very shocking case study. I mean, so in a physical setting, users are able to identify the numbers with the size and the color of the notes. That's how they're able to. So they'll create what we call chunking. So if it is 1,000, they will put in 10 notes of 100, and that becomes 1,000. The moment we move them to a keyboard pattern and say, okay, now enter 1,000, if you're not educated, you don't know what a 1 and 0 stand for. And then, of course, the whole icon issue. I mean, we said, okay, so in most iconry that is used, people will put a very large building with pillars and so on. And you ask a poor person that, what does this denote? And he would say, this is probably a temple. Yeah? Because you haven't seen a bank branch with pillars. I mean, a rural bank branch doesn't have these iconic pillars. And then we started reflecting that, yeah, maybe the whole Microsoft suite of icons just got copied for a segment that really doesn't relate with them. So one of the things that was very interesting was that once M-Pesa started, for them, send money transfer was the core business. So the Send Money app was basically money sort of flying in from one end of the screen to the other. So we asked poor people, what does this mean? So they said, we have no clue what this means. So we said, oh no, but it means sending money. So they said, but we never throw money in the air when we are sending money. So we said, how do you denote that you are giving money? So he said, if we are giving money, our hand is at the top. If you are receiving money, our hand is at the bottom. So, I mean, basic iconry that one would have thought that the industry would sort of think about it hasn't really been thought through. Because we are educated people, we have sort of grown up with these icons. So it's so very intuitive. That sort of brings me to Rahul, that Rahul, what do you would like to sort of understand this product? Because as I said, Avanti is coming with a very different, at least model. A, sort of digital only. B, starting with a very interesting use case, a very strong use case. So A, can you tell us what's the plan to sort of diversify? Some of the other use cases like savings are so difficult to crack. Does Avanti have plans to get there at some stage of its journey? And the other, even though Avanti is a very, very different model, and as Rahul pointed out, they have community partners, there is a physical and a digital interface. So I think it's very interesting that they understand that this segment probably requires some sort of a physical interface, at least till they get comfortable with the channel. But we at the same time are seeing all of this pure play digital lenders, so to say, creating some muck in, and that's getting picked up by the news media as well. So I'd just like Rahul to reflect on what what the regulator probably should be doing, or what the target segment should be mindful of. So A, about products, about the whole trajectory of Avanti, and B, then reflect on this sort of a negative trend that we see in the market. So over to you.
So Manoj, let me try and attempt that, because I think that's a series of questions there. So in terms of our plan, yes, credit has been our first intervention, and we have a long way to go. So for the foreseeable future, we're going to focus on this. We're currently operating in over 10 states. We're in about 110 districts plus. We've got a range of partners encompassing not-for-profit players, ag-tech players, BCs, etc. So, that's kind of our outreach model. Now, I think more importantly, what I'd like to share with the group and amongst us panelists is some of the things that we're learning. And what we learn is that, doorstep delivery, as you alluded to earlier, this is something that the microfinance industry has helped. And, it's considered as a very, very strong sort of USP and service. Now, the question is, doorstep delivery also is people related, and therefore there is cost. So one is that cost is ultimately passed to the user. Now, how do you still have a frictionless and a very high service-oriented fulfillment strategy, but yet you reduce the cost? And where does the role of digital come in there? And I think, and so that's one. And the second is the whole question of that when you're also giving these doorsteps, earlier, even disbursals used to be in cash. Now, pretty much that's gone away. Payments are being received in cash. Now, how do you sort of also change the whole empowerment angle to the user and using digital? So what we are seeing is that customers love the fact that our partners or their agents, either doorstep delivery or at a mutually convenient place will onboard them through the app. The fact that they have to give no papers, it's e-sign. We pick up the trust signals and the local, hyper-local input from our partners in order to do the credit assessment. That is something that is, a factor that the customers really like because it's very useful for them. And the loan gets processed very quickly. The decisioning, they're not kept in the dark about the decision. Money reaches their bank very quickly. All that happens. Now, I think there are going to be a couple of things here. One is that when you have to reduce your cost of acquisition over a period of time, customers will have to, there'll be some customers, one with the proliferation of more and more smartphones coming in. I think the self-serve journey will start to take shape. And once that happens, it's both empowering and it takes out costs. The second is, to some extent, you can do that even today, where it is the urban poor who might already have smartphones and or who understand apps, etc. So I think you have to. We've started off our journey more towards the sort of rural locations. Now, the other big element of cost disruption and empowerment is the whole element of digitizing cash. Now, cash clearly reduces economic velocity. And cash also, because you can't trace it, and that's kind of the way the rural economies, etc. work, it also keeps consumers in the dark because they don't build digital financial footprints. Now, making things like UPI more ubiquitous, when it's, making the functionality more robust on a feature phone, more and more people gravitating to some of those payment platforms. I think those are some of the things which will really sort of accelerate financial inclusion and take it to its next era. Because now users are, they've gone up in sort of their digital journey. They understand the value of technology. It is empowering to them and it reduces cost and friction for them. Now, the cashless journey is something which is very, very close to our heart. It's not easy because it's not just about building in-house capability. It's also about being mindful of the ecosystem and what are the sort of changes you need to bring about in the ecosystem to do that. So that is a bit of a tough slog, but that's where also the industry, the regulators, etc., have to come together to ensure that digitizing cash for 1 billion people is really what the path should be in the country. The second point which you mentioned is that the current news that has come out, unsavory news on some of the malpractices of digital lenders, etc. So I think let's not, you can't sort of paint everybody with the same brush. You have people with very strong governance and ethics and responsible lending practices. And then there are some who do not have that. And that's getting reflected in some of the news also that is coming out. I think there also, it's kind of the role as responsible lenders that we take. Now, one is from a regulatory perspective, etc. You can talk about data privacy, etc., and the rules and regulations and the laws that need to be followed. But how do you also ensure it's done in the spirit of the letter? And especially when you go to people who are unserved and underserved, I think there has to be a cultural DNA that you will not data weaponize these people because they are not that educated, maybe completely illiterate. Financial education is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. But that's where very strong ethics and systems have to be in place to ensure that lenders are custodians of customers' data. Do not data weaponize. And some of these things where you are taking access from customers in the first place, the question is, should that even be done? Where you're asking customers to sign off, where you can access their SMSs, texts, photographs, so on and so forth. And then all of that is being used as coercion towards collections as well when customers are not able to pay back on time. So, these are some very essential responsible practices that have to be inculcated in the industry, both from a regulatory standpoint as well as from a pure ethics standpoint.
Thanks, Rahul. I mean, I completely agree that these are fringe players and really, the unethical, fly-by-night operators, some of them whom have managed to come in. We had a very similar experience in Indonesia as well. The Indonesian government about a year and a bit ago banned almost in one stroke 780 applications. And most of these applications, the servers were traced to China. And that also opens us to this whole, possibility that something as basic as financial services industry, which has been always about regulation, always about regulations in the confines of a national geography. There are now possibilities that people can, using digital channels, reach out. And I think the regulator, to be fair to the Reserve Bank, the regulator has been on top of it. I mean, we were one of the first countries to come up with regulations around the whole digital lending model. And I'm sure that after the initial sort of, let's test the waters and see if we can make some quick money, the operators will realize that the regulators, also the industry is sort of vigilant, and the sort of press we are seeing would not happen, at least not happen on scale in a country like India, given the strong set of regulations we have. But with that, I turn to Mohan. Mohan, you started on this journey of telling us about the FIA products and so on. But what we'd like to know from you is that, building innovative products, but how do we get to offer such products at scale? Is there any experience that FIA has on this?
The thing is, from our point of view, we believe that customer-centric innovation is key to our growth, and we have designed our process keeping our customer in mind. We try to implement many solutions in our application Finvestra, primarily keeping in the mind for low and middle income as well as low literacy customers. We are using existing FIA agents as a primary channel to reach out these rural customers, and implemented various technologies and automated the job of the agent to serve the customers even in much better way. So we strongly believe that assisted model would be better solution for rural. In order to improve its reach in the far-flung areas where traditional branch-based banking is not feasible. So we offer the right product mix, certainly holds promise for a viable business model by meeting customer needs and aspirations. Certain products like money transfer, remittance, and welfare receipts have a natural pull. Our major advantage in remote rural outreach are we are one of the major player in BC industry during the last 8 years. We have strong in-house technology capability from data digitation to technology management. We have good track record for delivering mission critical projects due to strong on-ground execution capabilities. We have strong rural focus promoting entrepreneurship. We have real-time technology integration. We have robust on-ground field presence, assisting agents through our field-level technical executives, wealth officers, and relationship managers. And I think the product, so whenever we are desire to implement a product, so the product features should be match the expectation of the ground level customers, and it should create a confidence among to procure that product. So the first stage we have we have planned to establish a strong distribution network. We have another thing, we have a very strong agent acquisition process in place. Our strategy to identifying the agent consists of two models, that is direct and indirect model. In our direct model, by tying up with the localized, highly trusted stalwarts of the community, we can quickly scale nationally in a very short time of frame, thereby reaching into the depths of the underserved geographies in the country. In our indirect model, we do not have to build asset base all the way to the end customer and ride on the existing cost structure and talent of our partners. Through our partnership, we are trying up with lakhs of entrepreneurs across the country. By leveraging the installed customer base and providing them with our suite of products designed specifically for this segment, we are creating value at an exponential rate across the country. We believe this is to be one of our biggest differentiator and one that is not easily replicable. Another important factor, we create confidence among our agents about the viability of the business to sustain and continue to extend the service to the community. So call center support with vernacular language is also giving value addition to our agents. Another thing, our technology, AI-based technology platform with robot process. Our AI-based technology platform, Finvesta, in both web and mobile, is a user-friendly application. That platform was created by our in-house tech team based on the user convenience. Apart from that, we have our audit tab, which was created for the purpose of bank requirement, has got excellent appreciation. As far as the process is concerned, we are having huge experience and knowledge to make the field level process, back-end process, and stakeholder process to match in one point where we create our technology solution. Apart from that, we have field audit team. They will conduct a surprise audit at our agent point by using our audit tab, whether the agents are adhering the rules and regulations. So to conclude that, our success in digital transformation is based on the product design, establishing process, building of our user-friendly technology platform with the help of artificial intelligence, and the viability to sustain our ground-level agents. That's it.
Thanks, Mohan. Thanks so much. I mean, I'll just pause here and ask the organizers if there are any questions. Otherwise, I'll continue to harass the panelists with another round of questions. But if there are questions from the audience, I'd be very happy to take them up first. The chat working, so I'm sorry, I have to post this online. So do let me know. I mean, but I'll keep the ball rolling in the meanwhile. If there are any questions, then do let me know. Otherwise, so Radhika, the other challenge that we see in this user segment is failure rates. I mean, the whole Aadhaar-enabled payment system is a phenomenal system. I think the team that conceptualized it, and of course Nandan would have played a role there. The current team at NPCI, Dilip Aspe, was part of that original team, and I'm sure a lot of them were. I think just this ability to have conceptualized that, you know, the low income segment not so comfortable with numbers, because when we had done a research in a few countries, including in Uganda, using card-based systems, we went to a village, about 50-60 users were there of card-based solutions. All the users had the same password, 1111. And we asked the agent that what's this going on? He said, all of them forget the password. They keep coming to me to reset the password. I can't remember the password for 60 people. So I have just given all of them the yeah, because usage is low. It doesn't quite happen. You know, we're not using every second you up. So tendency to forget. Plus, we have to keep in mind that if you are uneducated, then this whole number one appears one to us is sort of Greek to them. I mean, they don't understand this is one or whatever. So you are now asking people to remember a string that makes no sense to them. Yeah. So in fact, one of our suggestions was that, you know, can we have password, which is, apple, banana, grapes, or something like that. So things that they visually understand, otherwise you are taking them into a territory which they haven't used. So I think coming back to the topic, the whole NPCI AIPS is just a phenomenal platform. I think the whole conceptualization, execution, and so on, but we still see a lot of failures. The failure rate is there. Maybe not because of the platform, maybe because of the device, maybe because of the users, biometrics being smudged and so on. So the point I'm trying to make is that, and Rahul also made this point, that we have partners and so on. So there is a whole universe, earlier banking was, you walked into my banking branch, my staff served you on my platform using my products. And, now with digitization, one of the things is that now I am on to a lot of ecosystem players, and we all combine to offer this. So payment service, the NPCI is one such player. Agents are another such very valuable part of the payment system, of the ecosystem. And similarly, there are so many others. The core platform provider is just of the cogs in this very large wheel that we are building. So what do you see as this whole ecosystem build-up that needs to happen so that we are really able to provide responsible financial services?
Yeah, sure. You're spot on, right? Like, it's not just one player. We're all integrated into this major puzzle. So yeah, failures is one thing. And also ecosystem wise, as I mentioned, the improvements that we need, also we need to work. It's a collective responsibility of all the players involved to take this forward, right? So I'll talk about like specifically on failures and also move on what other ecosystem level. So on the failures, yeah, definitely a problem. So there are also underlying banks, there is NPCI. So there are a lot of connections where anything could go wrong, right? So we have come a long way. I think all the digital providers of especially payments and what we've come a long way over the last few years. And to improve the experience, we're also what we call a skill switch, right? If a particular, we have a very automatic load balancing, or like if one bank is down, how do we route it to a second bank? Right? We have these technologies to figure out if something is down, move to a different one, kind of a thing, so that we still provide seamless experience to the user. If everything at a system level is down, how do we ensure the user is known in advance so that it's not stuck, right? Once he does everything, it's not stuck. So experiences like that we are working on, made a lot of progress along with the ecosystem on that front, right? But still, I think it is a continuous thing. And how do we make sure at the end of the day, no matter how simple or beautiful your product is, that payment has to go through for the user, right? That is the need. And he doesn't want it to be stuck in between. So a very important problem, and we are working on, already made good strides, but we're working on to make that experience seamless. Right? Other things on ecosystem. So overall at PhonePe currently, like we have around 250, 260 million registered users. By end of next year, if we really want to double that users, right? That is the kind of target and scale you are looking at, right? At PhonePe level, we doing the product experiences, the reach with the merchant network, all of it that we can do in our capacity is on one side. But at the same time, from the overall industry or regulation perspective, we also need to figure out what are the innovative products we can build for these users, right? Are there any new products that we can come up with which are very low ticket size and which cater to our, so when we do our user studies, we go to this tier 2, tier 3 cities and talk to people, right? What are their points of view on investments? People put these in their local trusted kitties, chit funds, right? Small ticket size items. And there are a set of people who are looking for assured returns, right? Like, I don't care about higher returns, but as long as there are assured returns, I'm fine. Right? We need to really resonate with those users and see what kind of new products we can come up at an industry level that can really work well with those users, right? Products is one. And the other side is like, the process wise, how do we make sure whatever is there in between, what the paperwork, how do we take that out? How can we have interoperable APIs so that it is one central thing, right? There are no barriers in between. It's a seamless experience for users as they move across different financial products. So even from the industry level, we need these kind of initiatives to make the next big jump, in my opinion. Of course, I think prerequisite is we're all dependent on counting on the internet penetration and the mobile smartphone penetrations. I think someone called out feature phone, right? Which is also a very important problem. How do we actually get to that user segment? So I think these are collective problems we need to solve to get to the next phase of users, in my opinion.
Thanks, Radhika. Very interesting. I'd like to get to Rahul and Mohan on this very aspect about the whole ecosystem, but there are a couple of questions. I'll just move to Mr. Venkatramu for the first one, which is that, so the question is, providing digital life certificate to the needy at doorstep is a service from IPPB, particularly in rural areas. So though this service is available, but most of the rural post offices do not offer this facility. So, what can be done about it? Mr. Venkatramu.
Yeah, so interesting question. See, what we've observed, especially in case of DLC, is that, this is available across, not only post offices, but also, other, some of the banks are also offering. But what has really gained momentum in the last couple of months, and we've seen demand for these services, is at the doorstep. And typically there are, very practical problems where the senior citizen is not really able to move out of his house. And also added to that, we had the pandemic going on. So in some of the centers, we've seen demand for these services coming from the doorstep. And let me tell you, we've almost served more than 500,000 such customers right at the doorstep. And not exactly at rural, not only rural, but also in urban metro centers, we've seen demand for these set of services. These services, though, can be offered at the outlets, the rural village level outlets. But again, the services are available, but how many customers will actually come and avail these services is definitely a big question.
Thanks. We have one more question, and maybe Rahul and then Mohan can sort of weave it into their answers about this whole ecosystem and how ecosystem is going to influence. The question, of course, is that I don't know what we can possibly give as a solution, but in the digital era, mutual fund houses are still asking a person to make an in-person verification visit for KYC. So what can we do about it?
Manoj, currently, most of the fund houses are using video KYC. Wherein the in-person verification is not required.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Thanks for this. So Rahul, and then we can have very quickly come to Mohan. We have 5 minutes. So some thoughts around the ecosystem players, because digital finance is not about one entity, it is about a host of players trying to offer a service or a range of services. So over to you.
So I think there's a lot that's been covered by Venkatramu, by Mohan, and already by Radhika as well. So, I mean, we all unanimously agree that it's all about the ecosystem. Now, even to speak about video KYC, the question is, who does it work for? Does it work for a rural user where the upload speed may not permit it? So who does it work for? And I keep gravitating to a lot of these solutions are fabulous, but they continue to serve the same crowd of 100 million people. And if we really sort of take the next leap, and then there are these, I would say there are these quandaries, which is more, do you plan for more smartphone users, or do you plan for functionality on feature phones? Where does that twain meet? And that's not an ecosystem question so much. It's also a question of different players having different strategies, etc. Just providing a sort of a little different context, because one of the questions you had also asked was in terms of products that matter. And I think if we again go back to the underserved and unserved, there are some clear, trends that we see that are taking place. So one is, if you look at sort of the whole SHG, JLG model, now we think it's not going away overnight, but individual lending is becoming more and more prevalent. So how do you build capability to do that for customers who are data dark, who are not very digitally savvy, and who also need a lot of financial education in a digital environment? Generalization of products or products, most entities like standardized products. Even people like us today, if we go and want to get a loan, you might have categories of loans, whether it's a vehicle loan or a housing loan or a personal loan, but the features of all of them tend to be quite similar. Now, we took a very differentiated approach because it needed a lot of reimagination, a lot of insights from the users on the ground to say, how do you build products that work for them, bolster their livelihoods, helps usher in economic prosperity in their lives, gets them out of poverty, and the whole element of sustainability in their lives is addressed. And one of the basic things that always comes across is that products should be designed according to cash flows of users. If you do it and they see an enhancement in their livelihoods, and the repayment is also tailored to their cash flows, it also then links to better credit quality. So if somebody doesn't have there's no point giving somebody a fortnightly repayment product if they have no means to pay fortnightly. And that's where what we did was we said we will move away from standardization and we will weave a few key tenets into our approach to this underserved market. One is that products must be hyper-local. And if your products are going to be hyper-local, then you also need to be able to do product development on the fly. And therefore, your system has to be built in a way from the get-go that allows for that. So that's kind of one of the things that we have done. Two is, when we talk about ecosystem is not just about the regulators and the payment providers and the payment gateways, etc. Let's also look at the role of communities and livelihoods in the ecosystem. And that's where we find that empowering these livelihood systems in rural India, etc. Because people also, and you were talking about the use case of credit. It's not just availing credit. People also feel very comfortable when they get credit through a source who they respect and know in the community. So Avanti might be the end lender to those people, but if the Via Media is through a partner that they respect, who plays other parts in their whole livelihood chain, it builds more resonance. So I think these are some of when we look at the ecosystem, we also have to look at a broader element of it, which is not just the savvy urban context, but also looking at once you get a way to solve for the next 100 to 120 million households.
Thanks, Rahul. We are past time now. Mohan, would you like to slip in something for sort of 30 seconds, not more?
Yeah. A simple thing I would like to tell. Across the industry, everybody has been focusing on lending. But from our point of view, based on our feedback from the field, why don't we lend the money back up with some savings? Because currently we have a wealth management system. Through wealth management system, we came to know a lot of people's financial discipline that monthly they are paying small amount to increase their wealth. So this type of the customers, certainly if they borrow money, they will make the repayment on time. So the thing is, if the lending part is backed with some savings, or it indirectly to encourage the customer to do some investment or saving, I think that would be great. And the thing is, the people will they will avoid huge interest for the emergency. For example, they borrow money, at the end of the month they are having some 2,000 to 3,000 rupees saving amount. That amount was spent by their family members by doing for using for alcohol something, and if emergency arises, these people will borrow money for 10%, 15% per month interest. So if you that's why in our mutual fund process, once the customer crosses 6 months and if they have any emergency, we are organizing a loan for against that mutual fund investment. So that interest also it's 12 to 13%. That will be helpful to the customers to improve their standard of living. Okay. So every time they borrow money for 10%, 15%, they cannot come out with their current standard of living, right?
Sure. I mean, the interest rate debate about the industry is something we can go on about. So thanks so much, the panelists, Venkatramu, Radhika, Mohan, Rahul. I mean, phenomenal experience we have there. And thanks to Access and Access Assist for helping organize this. And thanks to all the participants for tuning in. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.